To start with. Well, thank you very much. I just want to point out things that were really well known, scientifically based, and shared with Chris Whitty, Patrick Vallance, SAGE, and the Cabinet, and they were given everything. They looked through it, and you know that they didn't take any notice by what's happened. Our very first observations was that first paper there, it's all there. We had to disguise it as a new vaccine candidate. We called it Biovac 19. But what this actually did show was that this virus, the sequence when released and published in Nature, clearly showed that this virus had escaped from the lab. No ifs, no buts. Why was that? Because it had 6 positively charged inserts, which do not exist in Nature, 2 of which had been previously published by the Wuhan lab, saying, aren't we clever, we've made this bat virus more infectious to humans, but it had 6. So what did that mean? It had a charge, an overall charge of 8. No natural virus has a charge of greater than 6. So it made it hyper-infectious attraction to the cell. And we pointed this out, that the last thing you want to do is to make a vaccine based against this hypercharged protein. And we found that, in addition to this, we found that nearly 80% of the entire spike protein had crossover homology with human proteins. So this is guaranteed autoimmunity. The couple that were absolute were PF4, platelet factor 4, which, if you get antibodies to that, you get a thing called VITT, which we've heard all about. I won't go into it. It also has complete homology with myelin. If you give a vaccine with that homology, you get Guillain-Barré, you get Bell's palsy. I mean, the list goes on. We warned them of this, do not do it. You see, we published it in the Quarterly Review of Biophysics Discovery, in disguise, because it had been rejected by everybody, Nature, Science, Lancet, everybody. The wording was identical. We have no issue with your science, but it is not in the public interest. When is a warning that you could actually damage the whole population not in the public interest? The second paper that we did and we published there, and it was mainly with Andrew MacDonald there, who's a professor of immunology at Manchester and is now in Edinburgh. We looked at it as to what is the history of coronavirus vaccines? What does that tell us? Well, you can see we again had to disguise the title. The title is completely about trained immunity and BCG. But in fact, we actually went through the entire history of coronavirus vaccines. They've been working like mad. I didn't know that. It's very important for veterinary. They've never ever worked, and when they get past into primates, they often kill them. One of the reasons they never work is that the coronavirus is the infection. It lasts about 3 months and disappears. So even by the time you get a warp speed vaccine 6 or 7 months later, it's already gone. It's too late. But it is worse than that. Because once you vaccinate, you imprint, you basically rewrite the software of the immune system, so it will only ever see that first virus that result from your first vaccine. So when the variants come along, it will not see them, it will just fire up more antibodies against a virus that disappeared months ago, no longer exists, and it's worse than that. Because those antibodies will recognize bits of the new variants, but not neutralize them, and they will lead to enhanced infectivity. This is called antibody-dependent enhancement. This is exactly what we saw. And so what I want to point out here is that they said they followed the science. Everything was follow the science. We gave them all this information, and they didn't listen to us at all. Chris Whitty came back and said a lot of this needs more animal data. It did not need any more animal data. Just to re-emphasize that what we showed and what we gave and what we screened and what we warned about was 80%, 79%, you're a dogmatist, the homology with human epitopes. And I said the PFF4 and myelin. You do not want to make a vaccine with this. And we told absolutely everybody. We were ignored and we couldn't get it out. Sorry, that went very quick. Can we try. Oh, here we go. It's funny, isn't it? Now, I'm just putting this slide up because we dealt with cancer. And I say, at the beginning of this paper, we did not actually think there would be a link with cancer at that time based on this. But what we started to see is when we gave the booster, the booster was being rolled out, that I was seeing patients relapsing who'd been stable for 18 years with melanoma, which I treated with immunotherapy years ago before it became accepted. And what we saw was these relapses, cut a long story of investigation, it had to be T-cell suppression. Well, there's an old adage in vaccine, if you need to give a booster for a vaccine, it doesn't work. And if you look at the literature even harder, not only does it not work, but it makes you more likely to get infected. Totally the opposite of what a vaccine's meant to do. So why didn't do that? We speculated it was T-cell vaccines we were looking at in the laboratory. And then comes this brilliant paper with this superb title, Evidence of Exhausted Lymphocytes After the Third Anti-SARS-CoV-2 Vaccine Dose in Cancer Patients. On the right there, you can see it's suppressed. What better evidence could you get than that? This great big group who have done it. And the follow-up work shows it's widespread in all cancer patients after the boosters. I fell out with my hospital saying we should not be giving COVID vaccine boosters because you're going to cause cancer relapse and you get this T-cell suppression. What led to all my patients having such wonderful 18 years, total disease-free, stage 4 melanoma? It's because the T-cell responses were controlling it, and this vaccine goes in and destroys it. Now, basically, we're all cutting short, getting to the point. It then became evident that this was related to messenger RNA vaccines, because we weren't using AstraZeneca as the boosters. The messenger RNA vaccines, there was enormous fear that these actually alone could cause the cancer. And I get criticized, especially by Chris Whitty, for being just a cancer doctor and not knowing about these things, but I was actually on the board of CureVac Messenger RNA, the messenger RNA vaccine company, and I was on that board 13 years ago. I was on it for 5 years ago, and I left 7 or so years, been off it. I know exactly what the problems are with messenger RNA vaccines, so you can't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. There is enormous amounts of batch-to-batch variation with messenger RNA vaccines, and focus just that. This data is all coming out of the Pfizer. We know it contains SV40, which is a known oncogenic sequence. Just the thought of that makes me wince. This is something that can actually drive cancers in patients. Messenger RNA vaccines cause frame shifting, all sorts of unwanted genetic instructions, and they do not get rapidly clear as claimed, but they can actually integrate, and they have been detected in every organ at autopsy and in cancers removed at surgery. And I have spoken to pathologists who've actually identified that the spike protein can't be COVID virus vaccine. COVID virus messenger RNA disappears after 20 seconds. That is the problem with messenger RNA vaccines. You have to stabilize them and they can't control it. So we know it's not getting rapidly cleared, it's getting integrated into the genome, and it's actually involved in the cancers. But it gets worse than that. These messenger RNA vaccine spike proteins are known to bind all the major suppressor genes, P53, BRCA, MSH, which is the one involved with colorectal and the Lynch syndrome. And I think this is very much explains what a lot of what James is seeing. These are the genes that suppress cancer activity, and when mutated, greatly increase early cancer risk. You know that. If you're BRCA positive, you're more likely to get your breast cancer, ovarian cancer 20 years longer. The long-lived spike protein causes chronic inflammation, chronic clotting, disseminates any cancer cells, and indeed abnormal clotting is recognized as the major progressive factor in cancer, especially in pancreatic and prostate cancer. That has been known for years. And I go back to what's already been mentioned. Why did we go over all this when study after study has shown there's no better immunity than natural immunity for this type of infection? And the litany, if you should read the coronavirus vaccine history, not one of them has ever even worked. So why on earth did we do that? I'm just going to leave it at that because there are real scientific justice evidence why these vaccines are going to cause cancer. And I honestly, I don't want to depress you, but I don't think we've started yet because the suppressor gene interference takes several years before it will manifest. Thank you.